Hey everyone, Professor Hank here. So today we're going to learn how to overload the array operator in C++ for our classes. So let's go ahead and get started. So when we talk about overloading the array operator, we're talking about overloading this thing right here. So let's say that we had a class named foo and we instantiated an instance of it, and we wanted to do something like this. We wanted to say a index 2 equals 3, say, right? Well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to overload this thing so that way it'll work with our class. Okay, so let's go ahead and write a class that has an array in it called foo, and it's going to have a private array, which we'll call R, and it'll just be a statically allocated array with 5 elements in it. And as part of our public interface, we'll have function for overloading this operator right here. So this is going to follow the similar syntax as to what we've seen before. So we're going to have that operator keyword, but this time we're going to have square brackets here. And for our parameter list, we're not going to have a foo reference. What we're going to have is we're going to have an integer, because if you take a look at the syntax here, if you take a look at this statement, what goes inside of those square brackets? An integer. So that's what we're going to have here. Now, what are we going to return? Now, this is going to be new. What we're going to return is we're going to return an integer reference. Now, why are we going to do that? Because what's being stored in the array is an integer. And so what we're really giving back when we're working with this statement, C++ is accessing the memory address of this array, one of the elements of this array. And that's what's being returned by reference, is part of this array. And so by doing that, we can then specify, what value should be assigned there. So when you say a2 equals 3, we're saying place the 3 in the memory location whose address was returned, essentially, whose address was returned by the operator, returned by that operator. All right, so 3 is going to go into that place. Now, which place, which element? Well, it's going to be the third element. That's what this is for right here. So we're going to have as the body of our function, we have to name our parameter. So we'll just name it index. And so what we're going to do is, what did I say? We're returning by a reference. We're returning the memory address of one of the elements of the array. So that's going to clue us in. We're going to return the memory address of one of the elements of the array. So of the array, which element? The indexed element. Okay, and that's literally it. Okay, so now this is going to work. And we can update that locate memory location, but we could also retrieve it. So let's test that. We'll do a couple tests just to make sure. Okay, so you can see there's the 3 at that memory location. And then we could even go through and assign values to every single one of those elements. So we could do something like for int I equals 0, I less than 5, I plus plus, and then do something like a of I is equal to I times I times I. Okay, and then we could go through and retrieve those values and print them out on the screen. So then we could say cout a of I, and then put a space in between, and then we'll move the cursor to the next line. And I forgot one of my eyes up here, so let's put it in. Okay, so we'll test that. And you can see there is the values that are in the array. And again, this is working. Why? Because we're returning the indexed element by reference, so back to main. So when you say a of I is equal to I cubed here, you're saying put I cubed in the memory location whose address was returned here. And so in the case of a2, whose memory address? The third element's memory address, because that 2 is what gets copied into this index, and that's what's used right there. Okay, but this also allows us to do some other interesting things. So thing that we can do is we could do something like this. We could say, if index is greater than 0 and index is less than 5. Right? Those are the valid indexes. If that's the case, then we'll go ahead and do what we were planning on doing. But if not, then maybe we just kill the program, right? We say exit failure. And then let's make sure that we do our pound include cstdlib for the exit function. cstdlib. And then we could also maybe, print some kind of error message or something before we exit. So we might do something like index out of bounds or something. So we might say cout index out of bounds, right? And so in that way, we've added some array checking, right? Some bounds checking. So there's no way now that the function or that the array can be accessed in an illegal way, right? So you can't use invalid indexes to access this array because the range is 0 through 4, right? And so the only way that you access that part of the array is if it falls within that range. If that value that is used as an index is within that range. If it's anything else, then if it falls outside the range, let's say you specify index -5 or 12, well, then this is going to evaluate to false, and then we're going to kick down to the else and say, the index is out of bounds, and then we terminate the program. So if we tried to do something like a minus 3 is equal to 88 or something, well, then you're going to see that the program just terminates, right? So maybe let's put a little pause in here just so we can see the output. So we'll do something like cin.get before we exit. So now, we'll pause the program. You can see there it says index out of bounds, and then program terminates. So there was no way for us to try to access an invalid memory location because we've got this little guard here now. Okay, so and the key to making this work is this return by reference. So now you know how to overload the array operator in your classes in C++.